The void between stars held secrets, but Captain Sarah Chen never expected to stumble upon one quite like this. The ESS Pathfinder sensors had detected the anomaly 3 hours ago, a ship's energy signature unlike anything in their database, tumbling through space in a way that suggested its navigation systems were offline. Analysis complete, Captain. Lieutenant Rodriguez announced from his station, dark eyes fixed on the holographic display. It's definitely not human tech, and it doesn't match any known signatures in the Galactic Council's public registry. Sarah stood from her command chair, her movements deliberate in the ship's 0.8 g artificial gravity. The Pathfinder was Earth's newest deep space research vessel, dispatched to study astronomical phenomena in the Perseus Arm. First contact scenarios weren't part of their mission parameters, but Sarah knew that space had its own plans. Life signs, she asked, moving to study the sensor readouts over Rodriguez's shoulder. Weak but present. I'm reading approximately 30 signatures, but they're strange. Their biological patterns don't match anything we've encountered before. Rodriguez's fingers danced across his console, bringing up more detailed scans. The ship's hull is compromised in multiple locations. Whatever happened to them, it wasn't good. Commander David Nash, her first officer, appeared at her side. The Galactic Council's nearest patrol is 3 days out at maximum speed, he said quietly, and we're technically outside our permitted exploration zone. Sarah nodded slowly. The Galactic Council, that loose confederation of spacefaring species that had so far denied humanity full membership, had strict rules about where unproven species could operate. Earth's ships were restricted to carefully designated sectors, supposedly for everyone's safety. The Council claimed humans were too unpredictable, too aggressive, too primitive. How long do they have? Sarah asked the ship's chief medical officer, Dr. Helen Wong, who was already analyzing the biological data. Given the hull breaches and failing life support, Helen shook her head. Hours at most. Those life signs are getting weaker by the minute. Sarah felt the weight of command settle onto her shoulders. The Council's rules were clear: no unauthorized contact with unknown species. Violation could set back Earth's application for membership by decades, but there were lives at stake, and if there was one thing that defined humanity, it was their inability to ignore a cry for help. Begin rescue operations, she ordered, straightening her uniform. I'll take full responsibility for any diplomatic fallout. The bridge crew snapped into action, their training overriding any hesitation. Security Chief Maya Patel was already organizing her team, while engineering prepared for emergency repairs. As they drew closer, the alien vessel became visible through the main viewport. It was beautiful in a haunting way, all curved lines and iridescent materials, so different from the practical, angular designs of human ships. But now that elegant hull was scared and broken, venting atmosphere into the void. We're within range for emergency transport, Rodriguez reported. But Captain, there's something else. I'm detecting weapons signatures. This damage wasn't an accident. Sarah's jaw tightened. Hostile forces still in the area. Negative, but these energy readings, whatever hit them was big. Military grade. The implications were clear. This wasn't just a rescue mission anymore. It was potentially stepping into the middle of someone else's fight. But they were committed now. Dr. Wong, prepare medical bay for multiple xenobiology cases. Commander Nash, I want security teams at all emergency transport points. Lieutenant Rodriguez, keep scanning for any signs of whoever did this coming back. The next hour was organized chaos. The Pathfinder's emergency transport systems were designed for human physiology, requiring careful recalibration for each alien they brought aboard. The medical team worked frantically to stabilize patients whose biology they barely understood, while engineering crews struggled to prevent the alien vessel from breaking apart completely. The aliens themselves were unlike anything humanity had encountered before. Tall, graceful beings with crystalline growths protruding from iridescent skin, they seemed almost too fragile for space travel. Many were injured, their crystalline features cracked or shattered, leaking fluids that Dr. Wong had to analyze on the fly to determine treatment. One of them, presumably a leader given the complex patterns etched into their crystals, managed to communicate through a combination of gestures and mathematical sequences that universal translators could interpret. They were the Lissari, a peaceful species of explorers and artists. They had been attacked by the Krulthak, a warrior race that saw their crystalline biology as a resource to be harvested. The Galactic Council, the Lissari leader, tried to explain, their movements weak but urgent. They couldn't help. Too far, too dangerous. The Krulthak, they'll return. They always return. Sarah shared a look with Commander Nash. They both knew what this meant. By helping the Lissari, they had likely made an enemy of the Krulthak. And given the Council's restrictions on human military activity, they would have to face any consequences alone. But as Sarah watched her crew work tirelessly to save these alien lives, Dr. Wong improvising medical treatments, Engineer Martinez adapting equipment on the fly, Security Chief Patel gently helping injured Lissari to safety, she knew they had made the right choice. This was humanity at its best, resourceful, compassionate, and unwilling to stand by while others suffered. "We'll protect you," Sarah told the Lissari leader firmly. "That's what we do." The alien's crystals flickered with what might have been hope. "But you're human. The Council says, too dangerous, too unpredictable." Sarah allowed herself a small smile. Sometimes being dangerous and unpredictable is exactly what's needed, especially when it comes to protecting those who can't protect themselves. As if in answer to her words, the tactical display suddenly lit up with multiple warnings. Rodriguez's voice was tense as he reported, "Captain, 3 vessels just dropped out of FTL. Energy signatures matched the weapons used on the Lissari ship." The Krulthak had returned, just as predicted. But they were about to learn that humanity's reputation for being dangerous cut both ways. Sarah Chen took her command chair, her voice steady as she gave the orders that would commit them fully to this fight. "Battle stations, let's show them why the Council calls us Deathworlders." The Krulthak ships emerged from FTL like predators breaking cover, sleek, dangerous vessels with weapon ports already glowing hot. Captain Chen had seen enough combat simulations to recognize an attack formation when she saw one. Reading heavy energy buildup from all 3 vessels, Rodriguez reported, his fingers flying over his console. "Their weapons are different from anything in our database, but the power signatures are off the charts." "They're transmitting," Lieutenant Park announced from communications. "Audio only." The bridge speakers crackled with a harsh, grating voice. "Human vessel, this matter does not concern you. The Lissari are our legitimate salvage. Withdraw now, or face the consequences of interfering with Krulthak business." Sarah exchanged glances with Commander Nash. Legitimate salvage was a fancy way of saying they planned to harvest the crystalline beings aboard for whatever valuable properties their biology possessed. The thought made her stomach turn. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth science ship Pathfinder," she responded, keeping her voice steady. "The Lissari are under our protection. Any attempt to harm them will be met with force." A sound that might have been laughter came through the speakers. "Protection. From humans. Your species can barely leave its gravity well. The Council keeps you confined to your sector for good reason. Last warning. Withdraw." Sarah muted the transmission and turned to her crew. "Options. Their ships are bigger, better armed, and there are 3 of them," Maya Patel reported from Tactical. "But they're configured for fighting other Galactic Council species. Their shields are optimized for energy weapons, not kinetic impacts." Commander Nash leaned forward. "And they're used to fighting species from low-gravity worlds. Their artificial gravity is probably set to Council standard, 0.3 Earth normal." A plan began forming in Sarah's mind. Humanity's disadvantages, their evolved resistance to high gravity, their primitive reliance on physical weapons alongside energy ones, might just be exactly what they needed. Dr. Wong, how are our guests doing with our gravity? They're in the medical bay with localized field generators set to their normal 0.3 G, Helen reported. Any higher would shatter their crystal structures. They literally can't survive in Earth normal gravity. Sarah nodded slowly. Engineering, can you give me manual control of our artificial gravity bisections? Chief Engineer Martinez's voice came back instantly. Yes, ma'am. But I wouldn't recommend going above 1.2 G for more than short bursts. These research vessels aren't built like military ships. Noted. Security teams, prepare for boarding action. I want our heaviest combat suits ready. Maya, load the kinetic weapons. Time to show them why evolution on a high-gravity Deathworld has its advantages. The Krulthak didn't wait for another response. Energy beams lanced out from their lid ship, but the Pathfinder's point defense systems were already moving, clouds of metallic chaff dispersing the beams. Return fire, Sarah ordered. Kinetic spreads, Y pattern. Let's see how their shields handle good old-fashioned tungsten. The Pathfinder's railgun spoke, accelerating metal slugs to relativistic speeds. The Krulthak shields flared brilliantly, but unlike energy weapons that could be deflected, mass had to be stopped. The impacts sent vibrations through their ships that their low-gravity construction never had to account for. Direct hits on all targets, Maya reported with satisfaction. Their shield strength is dropping. They're not used to having to absorb this much kinetic energy. The enemy ships broke formation, trying to surround the Pathfinder, but they moved with a certain hesitation, as if surprised by the human vessel's resistance. Their return fire was fierce but unfocused, designed to overwhelm shields rather than penetrate them. They're preparing to board us, Rodriguez warned. Multiple small craft launching. Sarah allowed herself a grim smile. Just as planned. Security teams to your positions. Engineering on my mark. Increase gravity in all corridors except medical to 1.1 G. Let's give our visitors a taste of home. The first impacts came minutes later as Krulthak boarding pods latched onto the Pathfinder's hull. The security feeds showed them cutting through, only to stumble as they entered corridors where the gravity was nearly 4 times what they were used to. The Krulthak were imposing figures in their battle armor, easily 8 feet tall with multiple limbs bearing energy weapons. But watching them struggle to move under Earth normal gravity, while human security teams in powered armor charged them, was almost comical. Their superior reach and weaponry meant little when they could barely lift their arms against the crushing weight of their own bodies. They're retreating to their ships, Maya reported with barely contained excitement. Their boarding parties are requesting emergency extraction. The main Krulthak vessel transmitted again, but this time the harsh voice held a note of uncertainty. What are you? We're human, Sarah replied simply. We evolved on a world you would consider hell. Everything about us, our bones, our muscles, our reflexes, developed under crushing gravity and extreme conditions. You thought that made us primitive. We're showing you why it makes us strong. As if to emphasize her point, another spread of kinetic rounds slammed into the lead Krulthak ship. This time, their weakened shields couldn't fully compensate. Secondary explosions bloomed along their hull. Their power core is destabilizing, Rodriguez reported. They're going to have to shut down weapons to compensate. The Krulthak ships began to pull back, their formation ragged. Their retreat was almost as surprising as their arrival. Clearly, they weren't used to prey that could fight back effectively. You haven't won anything, the Krulthak commander snarled over the comm. The Lysari are still valuable resources. We'll return with a proper fleet. We'll be ready, Sarah promised. And we'll bring friends. Earth has more ships, more Deathworlders ready to protect those who need it. Remember that next time you think about harvesting sentient beings. The Krulthak ships vanished into FTL, leaving behind only debris and wounded pride. But Sarah knew this wasn't over. They had just committed Earth to protecting the Lysari, and likely made an enemy of a significant power in the galaxy. She turned to see the Lissari leader watching from the medical bay entrance, their crystals glowing with what she now recognized as awe. "The council was wrong about humans," they said softly. "They called you dangerous because you evolved in high gravity, because you still use physical weapons alongside energy ones, because you act on emotion as much as logic. But they never considered that those same traits could make you the greatest protectors the galaxy has ever known." Sarah looked at her crew, humans who had just fought impossible odds to protect strangers, who had used their supposedly primitive nature to overcome a technologically superior force. Maybe it's time the galaxy learned that being a Deathworlder doesn't make us monsters. It just means we're strong enough to stand up for those who can't stand up for themselves. As the Pathfinder's crew began repairs and tended to their guests, Sarah knew that today's events would echo across the galaxy. Humanity had just announced itself as a force to be reckoned with, not through conquest or aggression, but through the simple act of protecting those in need. The Council would have to reconsider their assessment of Earth's children, one way or another. The aftermath of battle left the ESS Pathfinder in a precarious position. While engineering crews repaired the damage from Krelthak weapons, Captain Chen faced a more immediate crisis in the ship's crowded medical bay. Dr. Wong had worked miracles keeping the injured Lissari stable, but their crystalline bodies required specialized care they couldn't provide indefinitely. "Their core temperatures are rising," Helen reported, gesturing to the delicate readings on her medical displays. "The crystal matrix that makes up their bodies is designed for deep space temperatures. Our life support systems weren't built to maintain that kind of cold." Sarah watched as human medical staff worked alongside the few uninjured Lissari, using improvised cooling units to keep their patients stable. The sight of her crew adapting medical equipment designed for humans to care for crystalline aliens filled her with pride, even as worry gnawed at her. "How long can we maintain them?" she asked. "Maybe 3 days," Helen replied. "After that, their crystal structures will begin to destabilize. They need proper Lissari medical facilities." Commander Nash appeared at the medical bay entrance, his expression grim. "Captain, we've got another problem. Long-range sensors just picked up a Galactic Council patrol heading our way. They're not responding to hails." Sarah had expected this. The Council monitored their designated sectors religiously, and the energy signatures from their battle with the Krelthak would have been impossible to miss. They were about to face the consequences of operating outside their permitted zone. "Status of the Krelthak?" she asked as they walked to the bridge. No sign of them returning yet, but Rodriguez detected several long-range communications from their ships before they jumped. "They're probably calling for reinforcements." The bridge was tense when they arrived. Lieutenant Park's fingers danced across her communications console, still trying to raise the approaching Council ships. Rodriguez kept his eyes glued to the sensor readings, watching for any sign of returning Krelthak vessels. "Council ships will be here in 6 hours, Maya reported from Tactical. 3 enforcement vessels, adjudicator class. They're armed, but their weapons aren't powered up." Sarah took her command chair, mind racing through options. The Council would demand an explanation for why a human vessel was outside its designated sector. They would want to know about the battle, about the Lissari, and they would insist on taking custody of the refugees. "Captain," Rodriguez called out suddenly, "I'm picking up new energy signatures. Multiple vessels dropping out of FTL. It's the Krelthak. They brought friends." The tactical display lit up with new contacts. 5 Krelthak warships, larger than the ones they'd fought before. They emerged from FTL in an attack formation that spoke of professional military training rather than the previous group's aggressive overconfidence. "They're broadcasting," Park announced, "to us and the approaching Council ships." The harsh voice of a Krelthak commander filled the bridge. "Attention human vessel and Council enforcement. We are here to apprehend criminals who attacked our salvage operation. The humans have interfered with legitimate business and must be held accountable. Stand down and prepare to be boarded." Sarah's jaw tightened. The Krelthak were trying to turn this around. to paint the Pathfinder as the aggressor. And with Council ships approaching, they had to play this carefully. "Open a channel to the Council ships," she ordered. "Maximum encryption." After a moment, a stern-faced arbitrator appeared on screen. The tall, gray-skinned official regarded Sarah with obvious disapproval. "Captain Chen, your vessel is far outside its permitted zone. Explain yourself." "Arbitrator, I'm transmitting sensor logs and medical data now," Sarah replied, nodding to Park. "The Lysari ship we rescued was under attack. Its crew were being harvested for their crystalline properties. We intervened to save lives." "That was not your right," the arbitrator stated flatly. "There are procedures, protocols. The Council exists to maintain order. With respect, arbitrator, your nearest patrol was 3 days away. The Lysari would have been dead by then." Sarah leaned forward. "The Krelthak are lying to you. They're not law enforcement. They're pirates hiding behind bureaucracy while they murder innocent people." The arbitrator's expression didn't change, but their secondary eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of agitation in their species. "You have no authority to make such accusations. The Council will investigate through proper channels. While you investigate, more people will die." Sarah's voice hardened. "The Lysari are under my protection. I will not stand by and watch them be murdered because of paperwork." The Krelthak ships were moving now, spreading out to surround the Pathfinder. They clearly intended to act before the Council ships arrived. "This is your final warning," the Krelthak commander transmitted. "Surrender the Lysari criminals, or we will take them by force." Sarah muted the transmission and turned to her crew. "Options. We can't take on 5 of their warships," Maya said. "Not directly. But," she smiled slightly, "they still haven't adapted to our gravity tactics. Their ships are still configured for low-G operations, and their shields are still optimized for energy weapons," Nash added. "They're not expecting another round of kinetic impacts." Sarah nodded slowly, a plan forming. "Dr. Wong, can you move all Lysari patients to the central medical bay?" "Already done." Helen's voice came back. "It's the only section we can keep cold enough." "Engineering, I need you to recreate what we did before, but bigger. Give me control of artificial gravity by sections, and be ready to reinforce structural integrity." Martinez's voice held a note of concern. "Captain, if you're planning what I think you are, it's going to put enormous strain on our systems." "Better strain than surrender," Sarah replied. She turned back to the arbitrator's image. "I'm transmitting our sensor data from the previous Krelthak attack. Review it quickly, because you're about to see something similar." The Krelthak didn't wait for diplomacy. Energy beams lanced out from their ships, more focused and coordinated than before. The Pathfinder's shields flared under the assault. "Return fire," Sarah ordered. "Full spread of kinetic rounds. And engineering, initiate gravity pulse." What happened next would be talked about in Council chambers for years to come. The Pathfinder's artificial gravity system, designed for maintaining a comfortable Earth-normal environment, instead created a rippling wave of gravitational distortion. For beings evolved in low gravity, it was like being hit with a tidal wave of force. The Krelthak ships, their internal systems calibrated for minimal gravitational stress, groaned under sudden forces 4 times what they were designed to handle. Deck plates buckled, joints stressed, and crew members found themselves pinned by their own body weight. "Direct hits on all targets," Maya reported with fierce satisfaction. "Their shields are failing. They didn't expect us to weaponize gravity itself." The Krelthak formation broke, their coordinated attack dissolving into chaos as they struggled against forces their ships were never meant to endure. Several vessels began emergency maneuvers to escape the Pathfinder's gravity field. "You see now, arbitrator," Sarah addressed the Council official, who was watching with all 4 eyes wide. "The Krelthak aren't law enforcement. They're predators who prey on those they think are weaker. But humanity, we evolved to be strong enough to protect others. That's what we're doing here, protocols or not." The arbitrator was silent for a long moment, watching as the Krulthak ships retreated in disarray. Finally, they spoke. Perhaps the Council's assessment of humanity requires revision. 3 days after the battle, the ESS Pathfinder sat in high orbit around Lysaria Prime, its mission now far different from the scientific survey it had been designed for. The ship's crew had worked tirelessly to keep their crystalline refugees alive during the journey, pushing both themselves and their equipment to limits never intended by their designers. In the ship's observation lounge, Captain Sarah Chen watched the gleaming world below. Lysaria Prime was beautiful, a frozen giant where crystal cities caught the light of a distant sun, creating rainbow auroras that danced across the planet's perpetual ice fields. It was a world that would kill an unprotected human in minutes, yet its native inhabitants found it perfectly comfortable. The last of the medical transports are away, Commander Nash reported, joining her at the window. Dr. Wong says all the Lizari will make full recoveries once they're in proper medical facilities. Sarah nodded, watching another shuttle descend toward the crystalline spires below. And the council representatives, still arguing about protocols and jurisdiction. Nash's lips twitched in a slight smile. But they're doing it much more politely now. Amazing what watching a human ship drive off Krulthak raiders can do for diplomatic relations. The door slid open, admitting Maya Patel and Rodriguez. Both looked tired but satisfied. The past few days had kept security and sensors working overtime, watching for any sign of Krulthak retaliation. The Lysarian Defense Force has taken up escort positions around us, Maya reported. They're not as advanced as council ships, but they're committed to protecting their human saviors. She made the air quotes visible. Their words, not mine. Rodriguez added, and the council ships are maintaining the protective cordon at the system's edge, officially to deter Krulthak aggression, but we all know they're really watching us. Sarah turned from the window to face her officers. The events of the past few days had changed everything, not just for the Pathfinder and her crew, but potentially for humanity's place in the galaxy. The Lysari High Council is ready to receive us, Hark's voice came over the comm. Their speaker specifically requested your presence, Captain. The transport to the surface required special environmental suits, not for radiation or atmospheric pressure, but for temperature. The Lysari capital city existed in a permanent state of deep freeze that would shatter human bones without protection. Yet even through the suit's insulation, Sarah could feel the alien beauty of this crystalline world. The Lysari High Council chamber was a marvel of geometric precision, its walls growing naturally from the ice in complex fractals that seemed to capture and amplify light. The council members themselves were arranged in a spiral pattern, their crystalline bodies refracting light in ways that created subtle communication patterns incomprehensible to human eyes. The speaker rose as Sarah and her officers entered, their crystal structure singing with harmonics that the universal translator rendered into speech. Captain Chen, defenders of the defenseless, you have shown us that the Council's judgment of humanity was deeply flawed. Sarah stepped forward, her suit's servos compensating for the low gravity that made human movements awkward here. We only did what any human would do when seeing others in danger. That is precisely our point, another council member chimed in, their crystals resonating with emphasis. Your species evolved on what we would consider a nightmare world. High gravity, extreme temperature variations, constant environmental hazards. The council saw this as making you dangerous, unpredictable. They failed to consider, the speaker continued, that such evolution could produce not just physical strength, but strength of character. Your crew risked everything to save strangers. You faced superior forces without hesitation. You turned your very adaptations, what others saw as primitive traits, into advantages that protected the weak. A holographic display activated in the center of the chamber, showing recordings from the Pathfinder's battles with the Krulthak. Sarah watched as her ship, small compared to the raiders, used tactics no council species would have conceived: gravitational warfare, kinetic weapons, taking advantage of their high-gravity evolution to overwhelm enemies who had relied too long on fighting only low-gravity species. The Krulthak have preyed upon species they considered weaker for too long, the speaker declared. They chose their targets carefully, worlds like ours, where evolution favored delicate structures and precise engineering over physical resilience. They never expected to face warriors evolved in conditions that would shatter our bodies. Sarah recognized the political implications immediately. The Lizari are proposing an alliance with Earth. More than that, the speaker's crystals pulsed with excitement. We are formally requesting that the Galactic Council recognize humanity's potential as protectors. Your physical adaptations make you uniquely suited to defend species who cannot defend themselves. Your moral courage makes you worthy of such a role. The chamber resonated with harmonic agreement from the other council members. Sarah felt the weight of the moment. This wasn't just about the Pathfinder's actions anymore. This was about redefining humanity's place in the galaxy. The council representatives in orbit are already transmitting our proposal to their superiors. The speaker continued. The Krulthak's attack on our people, and your response to it, has forced them to reconsider many assumptions about human nature. They saw our strength as a threat, Commander Nash observed, but strength can protect as easily as it can harm. It's the choices we make that matter. The speaker's crystals chimed in agreement. Exactly. The very traits that made the council fear humans. Your physical capabilities, your aggressive protection of the weak, your ability to survive in conditions other species find horrifying. These are exactly what the galaxy needs, not to conquer, but to defend. Sarah looked at her officers, seeing in their eyes the same recognition of this moment's importance. Humanity had never wanted to be seen as monsters or savages. They had never asked to evolve on a world that other species considered a death trap. But perhaps those very circumstances had shaped them into something the galaxy desperately needed, protectors strong enough to stand against those who would prey on the weak. We would be honored to help protect those who need it, Sarah said carefully. But any formal alliance will need approval from Earth's governments. Of course, the speaker agreed. But you have already shown the galaxy what humanity truly is. Not dangerous beasts to be caged, but guardians to be valued. The Pathfinder's actions here will echo across the stars, Captain Chen. You have opened a door that cannot be closed. As if to emphasize the speaker's words, a new alert came through their suit's communications. Lieutenant Park's voice was excited. Captain, you're going to want to hear this. The council ships are receiving new orders from their superiors. They're formally requesting Earth's assistance in investigating other reported Krulthak activities in nearby sectors. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. Sometimes it took a crisis to reveal truth, and the truth was that humanity's supposed weaknesses were actually their greatest strengths. They were children of a world that had forged them in gravity and challenge, and they would use that strength not to dominate, but to defend. 6 months after the events at Lizaria Prime, the ESS Pathfinder sailed through space with a different purpose. No longer just a research vessel, it led a joint human-Lizari task force dedicated to protecting vulnerable species from those who would exploit them. Captain Sarah Chen stood on her bridge, watching as her crew worked alongside crystalline Lizari officers who had volunteered to serve on the Deathworlder ship. Patrol route update from Council Command. Lieutenant Rodriguez announced, his console now modified to accommodate both human and Lizari interface requirements. They're reporting increased Krulthak activity in the sickness sector. Sarah noted how naturally her crew now worked with their alien counterparts. The Lizari had adapted remarkably well to serving on a human vessel, though they required special cold chambers for their quarters and environmental suits for most ship operations. In return, their natural affinity for complex crystalline technologies had helped upgrade the Pathfinder sensors and communication systems beyond anything Earth's engineers had thought possible. The Krulthak are getting desperate, Commander Nash observed from his station. Ever since the Council approved the Joint Defense Initiative, they've lost 8 major hunting grounds. They're running out of easy targets. A chiming sound indicated the arrival of their Lizari science officer, Crystal Song in Harmony, whom the human crew had nicknamed Crystal. The crystalline being moved with careful grace in their environmental suit, their matrix glowing with patterns that the crew had learned to recognize as determination. "Captain," Crystal's translator rendered their harmonic speech, "we're receiving interesting data from the Council Diplomatic Court. 3 more species have petitioned for human protection treaties this week alone." Sarah wasn't surprised. The past 6 months had seen a complete reversal in how the galaxy viewed humanity. What was once feared as a dangerous species trapped on a death world was now sought after as a protector of the vulnerable. Earth's governments had been overwhelmed with requests for defensive pacts and protection agreements. "Status of the new defense platforms?" Sarah asked, turning to Maya Patel, who now coordinated security operations with a joint human-Lissari team. "The first wave is operational," Maya reported with pride. 20 stations, each combining human kinetic weapon systems with Lissari crystal technology. The Krulfak won't be able to raid the Argos cluster anymore without running into a very nasty surprise. The defense platforms were a perfect symbol of how things had changed. Human engineering built to withstand high gravity and extreme conditions, enhanced by Lissari crystal tech that could channel and focus energy in ways Earth scientists were still trying to understand. Together, they created defenses that could protect vulnerable worlds from those who would exploit them. "Message from Earth Command," Park announced suddenly. "Priority 1. The main screen activated, showing Admiral Helena Martinez, the newly appointed commander of Earth's Interstellar Defense Force. Her expression was serious but satisfied. "Captain Chen," she began, "the Council just voted on Earth's membership status. It's official. We're in, but not as a standard member species." Sarah felt her crew's attention focus on the screen. This was the moment they'd been waiting for, the final outcome of the changes their actions had started. "The Council has created a new designation," Martinez continued. "They're calling us a guardian species. We'll have unrestricted travel rights throughout Council space and the authority to intervene when we find evidence of exploitation or aggression against vulnerable species." The bridge crew exchanged glances. It was more than they'd hoped for. Official recognition of humanity's new role in the galaxy. "There's more," the Admiral added. "The Council is formally requesting that we establish what they're calling the Sentinel Program. Joint human-alien crews on ships like the Pathfinder, patrolling the sectors where predatory species like the Krulfak operate. They want us to train other species in defense techniques that take advantage of our high-gravity evolution." Crystal's matrix pulsed with what Sarah had learned to recognize as joy. "Your people have given hope to so many. We Lissari were not the first to suffer from those who saw us as resources rather than people, but because of humanity, we may be among the last." Sarah thought about how far they'd come. 6 months ago, humanity had been seen as barely civilized savages, trapped in their designated sector, because other species feared their physical capabilities and aggressive instincts. Now those same traits were recognized as valuable, not for conquest or dominance, but for protection. "Admiral," Sarah responded, "the Pathfinder and her crew are ready to help establish the Sentinel Program. We've learned a lot about working with other species, about how our differences can become strengths when we work together." "I know, Captain. That's why your ship is being designated as the training vessel for the first wave of Sentinel crews. The Council species need to learn that being a Deathworlder doesn't make us monsters. It just means we're strong enough to protect those who need protection." As the transmission ended, Sarah looked around her bridge. Human and Lissari working together, their very differences making them stronger. Outside, the stars streamed by as they patrolled space that had once been hunting grounds for pirates and exploiters. "You know," Commander Nash said quietly, "when we first found that damaged Lissari ship, I worried that helping them would damage humanity's chances of joining the Council. Instead, it showed them exactly why they needed us." Maya added, "Not as threats to be contained, but as guardians who could protect the vulnerable." Sarah nodded, watching a Lissari ensign work seamlessly alongside their human counterparts. "That's the real legacy of Earth. Not that it made us strong, but that it taught us to use that strength to help others. We evolved on a world that most species consider hell, but it didn't make us monsters. It made us protectors. The Pathfinder continued its patrol route, carrying its mixed crew of humans and aliens. They were more than just explorers now. They were sentinels, guardians, protectors of those who needed protection. And across the galaxy, other ships were being prepared, other crews being trained, as humanity stepped into its new role not as feared Deathworlders, but as defenders of the weak. In the end, it wasn't humanity's physical strength that had changed the galaxy's perception of them. It was their choice to use that strength not for conquest or domination, but for protection. They had shown the galaxy that being born on a death world didn't make them dangerous. It made them exactly what the galaxy needed: guardians strong enough to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. The ESS Pathfinder sailed on through the stars, its human and alien crew united in purpose, carrying with them the promise of a safer galaxy for all species. They had become living proof that sometimes the most feared traits could become the greatest gifts when used in service of others.